Hi guys, we are talking about Romans chapter 11. We're in verses 11 through 24. So I titled this one, The Root of the Jews' Rejection. And Paul's been talking about his brethren, the Jews, and how they have rejected Jesus. He has grieved and he has pointed to prophecy which predicted it. And now he's going to tell us why. If you look at Romans chapter 11, verse 11, it says this: "So I ask, did they stumble in order that they might fall? By no means. Rather, through their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous." What is Paul asking? Did the Jews stumble? Remember, Jesus is a stumbling block over which they fell, which we went through. Did they stumble so that they might fall? Was that the ultimate goal? Is that God's plan? Why the unbelief of these Jews? What's God's ultimate plan for the Jews, if not for them to fall? Here's Paul's favorite phrase once again: by no means. It wasn't so that they would fall. Absolutely not. God had another plan to work out first, a plan that hinged upon their unbelief, the unbelief of the Jews. He tells us what it was. Look at verses 11, the latter portion of verse 11 and 12. Rather, instead, wasn't to fall. Rather, through their trespass, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous. Now, if their trespass means riches for the world, and if their failure means riches for the Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? Exclamation point. So rather, it wasn't that. It wasn't for them to fall. That wasn't the ultimate plan. Rather, the purpose of the Jews' blindness and unbelief was for these reasons. Number one, to save the Gentiles. Number two, to make the Jews jealous. And number three, to save the Jews. So look at Romans 11 verses 13 through 15. Paul says this: "Now I am speaking to you Gentiles, inasmuch then as I am an apostle to the Gentiles, I magnify my ministry in order somehow to make my fellow Jews jealous, and thus save some of them. For if their rejection means the reconciliation of the world, what will their acceptance mean but life from the dead?" So, he says he wants to make the Jews jealous by preaching the gospel, by the Gentiles coming to faith, so that the Jews will look over and say, hey, we want that too. And thus, then they will be saved as well. So Paul likens this reality to a tree. Jesus is the root, and the Jews are the natural branches, and the Gentiles are the new branches which were grafted in. So botany, anyone? Paul says the natural branches were broken off. Why? Because of their unbelief. And the grafted branches are firmly connected to the root. How? By faith. Paul warns the Gentiles not to be arrogant, reminding them that if God cut off the natural branches, the Jews, he will not spare them either if they forfeit their faith for unbelief. So obviously, believing in Jesus is the key here, and that goes across the board for everyone, Jews and Gentiles alike. Paul says God's severity to the Jews meant kindness to the Gentiles, but he says that that kindness will only continue if the Gentiles continue in faith. Otherwise, they too will be cut off. Likewise, if the Jews repent of their unbelief, they will be grafted back into God's favor through Christ. So, this is not rocket science. It's simple. The root of the Jews and Gentiles' rejection, if they're rejected, is unbelief. It's not because they're a Jew and it's not because they're a Gentile. It's because they don't believe in Jesus. That's the root of rejection. Faith in Jesus brings both Jews and Gentiles into God's favor. Unbelief cuts both Jews and Gentiles off from God's favor. There's no partiality and there's no favoritism with God. And we've seen this in other places. If you look at Romans 2:11, which we've already gone through, if you look at Acts 10:34, we know that God does not show favoritism. So the same truth is available to everyone, the same salvation and the same rejection is felt by everyone if they don't believe. So either way, and God's plan and Paul's mission is one and the same, to save as many humans as possible. And there's only one way that happens, and that's through Jesus Christ. Science and botany have their place, but understanding God's plan of salvation is significantly more simplistic. So, next time we're going to finish Romans chapter 11, and we're going to talk about Israel's future and maybe some of their past as well. But I hope that's helpful. Have a good day.